George Bousset,
Here.
Gary Eater,
Here.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Jim Schultz, David Mindell, Charlie Ortman, Jerry Richardson.
Why don't we just go around and everyone can introduce themselves, and we are going to have a couple speakers for today, so I want them to be able to introduce themselves as well. So I'm Mary Jo Gingras with the Land Conservation Department.
Seth Ackbarth, engineer technician, land and water.
Scott Caven, Land and Water Specialist, Ashland County Land and Water.
Ellie Crocht, Ashland County Land and Water.
Matt Bolin, agriculture technician, Ashland County Land and Water, also servicing Douglas, Bayfield, and Iron County.
Pat Kinney, Ashland County Board.
George Bousset, Ashland County Board.
Kara, did you want to introduce yourself? I mean, you're here. Come on.
Everybody hearing okay? We're gonna go to approve the agenda for today. Do I hear
Move to approve.
Charlie?
Yep.
We got approval. Second by Jerry Richardson. Do we have to call for aye or no? Okay. Approval of the minutes. We need to vote on approving the agenda. Do we do it? Yeah. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on. Approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Bousset was
Motion
second.
by Charlie, second by Jerry. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, discussion, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, State Nursery Forester presentation.
Yeah, oops, sorry. It's more for anybody who wants to ask and answer questions. I was given 4 bullet points as a general outline, and I'll cover those points. First off, there seems to be an issue with low survival rate of bare root tree seedlings and plantings within the county. I'm not sure when the plantings are failing from. I would say primary reasoning behind this is going to be drought since 2021, and it's gotten progressively worse to the point now where the majority of Ashland County is now in severe drought. And it's gotten progressively worse over the last 4 years, and it seems like the summer months seem to be the driest months. So we're getting a lot of water in the spring, a lot of water in the fall. That's not the growing season, so it's going to affect survival rate of any trees that were planted. And there's not a whole lot that can be done about that. There's some talk about other seedling types, so I'll cover those as well. There's three main types of seedlings that you can purchase from nurseries, whether it be the state nursery, county nurseries, or private nurseries. The first is going to be bare root seedlings. They're going to be the cheapest seedlings that you can purchase, normally cents to low dollars per seedling. One of the biggest things with bare root seedlings is handling and care while planting. You can't expose the roots to dry air. You have to keep them in peat moss, sand, something to keep the roots moist. If you even leave them out for 10 minutes on the tailgate of your truck, you're probably going to get root desiccation and they're going to die. Our next seedling type is going to be a transplant, and the only difference between this is the seedlings are lifted from the original nursery bed that they're grown in, and they're transplanted at a lower density into another bed. And this helps them stimulate growth, so they're going to be a bit larger in the top, and they're going to have about 2 to 3 times the root density. There is going to be a better survivability with these seedlings, but it's going to come at a cost that's 2.5 to 3.5 times that of a bare root seedling. Normal situations where you would want to plant these are Christmas tree plantations, or places where you do not want your trees to die at all. You want to have as close to 100% success rate as possible. But again, you're coming at 2.5 to 3.5 times the cost, so they can be cost prohibitive. The final type of seedling that you can purchase is going to be a containerized seedling. They come in little tubelets. They're much easier to plant. They store better. They don't suffer from planting shock quite as much as the previous two types. So the previous two types have no soil around the roots when you purchase them and receive them. The containerized is going to come with a little soil plug around the root system, making it easier to plant. They're really good for extremely dry and sandy sites, or really rocky and unforgivable sites. That's normally when you're going to see that. But containerized seedlings are going to come at 2 to 10 times the cost of a bare root seedling. So again, there's some cost issues there. Our next topic that was given to me was best trees for sandy soil. And when tree planting, work with local foresters. They're going to be able to look at soil maps for you. Wisconsin has highly variable soils over very short distances. In this county, you can go from heavy clay to sandy soils to lowlands. So make sure you're planting specifically towards the site that you want, and you need to be looking at soil maps and matching that with best suitable species. Now, for some species available for very, very dry site sands, you're going to be looking at your 3 pine species. Jack pine is going to perform the best. It's extremely drought tolerant. So just some anecdotal information: when I was still a forester over in Grantsburg, which is a little bit farther south here on the Minnesota border, during 2022 year, we planted jack pine next to red pine. Red pine experienced about 50% mortality because of drought. Jack pine only experienced about 10% mortality. So it is going to be a more drought tolerant species, though maybe not the most ideal species for people to plant, but it does perform well. Some other species are going to be, again, red pine, white pine, bur oak performs very well, red maple, and then northern pin oak, though not ideal. It's going to perform well, though you're more than likely not going to be able to buy that from any nurseries. They don't normally produce it. It seems to grow by itself. If we're looking at more moderately sandy soils, so a little bit more loam component, you can get away with some white spruce, red oak, balsam fir. White pine's also going to grow well on those sites. But again, work with a local expert to match your tree species to that site, because again, you could go across the street in Wisconsin and have completely different soil types. Finally, we have use of a tree planter. So a mechanical tree planter is going to keep that uniformity in the planting once it's calibrated correctly. If you do rent or borrow a tree planter, you should probably have the forester or the caretaker of that come out with you and show you how to use it. If you set the planting depths wrong, you will kill every single tree that you have. But if you set the planting depths correctly, you're going to get a far better outcome. It's going to keep that uniformity. You're not going to be planting too deep. You're not going to be planting too shallow, and you're going to get an overall better outcome. So there is not a tree planter housed by the DNR nor the county in Ashland County, but the DNR does have planters available very close. There's one in Washburn, Wisconsin, not too far away. There's one stored in Douglas, Wisconsin, or Douglas County, Wisconsin, and we also have one in Sawyer County. That one comes with a fee, which is just $10 per 1,000 trees planted with it. But there are options available. If you're interested in it, contact myself, contact Kara, and we can get you that tree planter. And again, that's normally going to improve your outcome. You can't use tree planters on recently harvested sites or anything like that, though. So if you're replanting like a clear cut plantation or something like that, you're going to have to go with hand planters. So basically planting bars that you shove in the ground. A lot more difficult, but that's the only option in some of those scenarios. So with that, that's the points that I was given. So open it up to any questions or anything.
Could you repeat the most drought tolerant species? I got the pines, the bur oak, pin oak, and there was one other species you mentioned in there
There's-
besides jack pine.
Red maple.
Red maple.
Yes,
Okay.
red maple. So sugar maple, not, it's more of a mesic tree species. So it likes moister soils. It's not going to grow well in very sandy, droughty soils. So you definitely, in dry soils, you have to plant specific species. They're not going to perform in any sort of a drought or anything like that.
Mary Jo, could you pull up the Ashland County website with the tree sale? So my first question is, you mentioned that the transplants, so like a tree that is labeled as 2-1, it's spent 2 years in its original bed and then 1 year as a transplant. So are the trees that Ashland County is getting, are those transplants? Or are those just in their original seed bed?
Yeah, it depends. We do both. So on our website here, you can see the age and it tells you 2-0, the high bush cranberry are transplants. They list the age as 1-1. So it was in a seedling bed for a year and then a transplant. So we list on our website the age and we list if they're a transplant. So tamarack coming across right there says transplant.
So, and these are the same trees that we have been getting, it's just that on this website now, are they coming from a different location?
Correct. Yeah, we
Same site?
purchase them from a nursery and we are only able to purchase what is available. So some of the species we can get transplants and other species, the nursery does not have transplants.
So if you go up on that website, okay, go down then. Let's see. So at the bottom of this, it says, right at the last 2 lines, offering physically larger trees and shrubs that are more adaptable to climate change, and then ordering older transplant trees and shrubs. So if the transplants have a higher success rate because there's more root mass, then there's a lot of trees on there that aren't transplants, and I'm not sure how much people are going to understand that difference. So I've been planting a lot of trees for a long time, and I had talked to Mary Jo, so a lot of the questions emanated from that. My success rate is really, really poor on anything other than some ground with good moisture, but not overly wet. I did 240 or 50 of the oak plugs my first year. Planted them in early May, got them out of northern Minnesota. It was one of those hot first weeks of May. And by the time I got those trees planted to turn around and watering them, I don't know if I had any of those trees survive that year. I did order 25 from Ashland County. I know 8 or 10 of those survived at least the first year. So as I go through all of this stuff, I think, I have way more questions than answered. I'm not going to get time to ask them all today. I think we could put together more information on stuff, with the tree stuff. I think most people are like me. You're ordering a bunch of trees, and at least what I see when I go pick up trees, people got a bunch of trees. I don't think they're planting them in the yard and babying them. I think they're planting them out wherever. I, on the other hand, have really babied a lot of the trees, including mulching. A few years ago, Bayfield County needed, or Bayfield Electric was chipping in our neighborhood and needed a place to dump mulch. And so I got more mulch than I could possibly use. So I've mulched trees of fabric around them. I've got a 300-gallon tank that used to be a sprayer tank on wheels. I watered those trees and watered those trees. I bought tree protectors. I have done way more babying those trees, than a person possibly could imagine. And I'm still really struggling with that. So in the last 2 years, I've planted acorns with a cone spreader and then worked those in. I've got 18 acres between acorns, a little bit of shagbark hickory and black walnuts now. But I've got to believe that other people, if you actually go back and look at your trees, you're not ending up with nearly the trees you were hoping. And so this year, I did order 500 2.0 white oak to put into a field I did acorns a year ago in. But I'm going to focus more on site prep. We don't really talk about site prep on this very much. So, so one of the things from reading is the bigger the tree, when you dig it, the more percentage of root mass you lose. And the more root mass you lose, the more water it needs to survive. And the bigger the tree, the longer it takes to redevelop roots to get that ratio of root mass back to tree. So, I'd be interested in is working on kind of an FAQ with, like Richard and Kara, where some of these questions I have, if I could pose them to them and then have experts, give me an answer, and, we work on a document that would help people like me. So I'm going to focus on site prep this year, and then order, except for those 2.0 white oak, which are going into a field that doesn't have sod yet, because the first step seems to be site prep. So you're not fighting the grass, which is going to suck up the water, and then smaller trees, might even shade them if they're real small trees. And then site prep, you can work it up, you can use Roundup, but something I've done, like that lower field that's fenced off, is I've just taken a shovel and I'll turn an area 4 shovelfuls, kind of a square, in the fall to kind of kill the grass. So there's less grass competition, but I found in the wet areas, if I go back in the spring with my planting bar, it's spring and it's wet, it's muck. And I can't really use the planting bar to plant into that either. So there's different ways we could do site prep, whether we are open to chemicals or not in doing it, or how much manual labor. Some people, post hole digger. And then my cedars, Kara was out and looked at them at the end of July. I didn't order cedars this year because I'm going to do more site prep. Even those I have turned over bigger areas and mulched them in the fall before, but they're not doing much. I'm going to go with smaller trees because I'm concerned that my losing too much root mass, or I just can't spread those roots out in that wet ground very well, and then try to come back with larger numbers of small trees. So this past spring, and I'll leave it with this, I guess, because I got more questions than I think the agenda has time to, unless you're okay with a lot more questions. As I came back from planting my first round of trees, and I said to my wife, I said, I don't know, I'm not even keeping up with what I'm losing. And she said, yeah, I don't know why you keep doing this. And which really said to me that she was seeing the same thing, but hadn't said anything. And so I'm trying to work smarter instead of harder.
So a couple things, is white pine, is white oak a species that is going to struggle here in Ashland County? I noticed it's not one of the species that you mentioned, like you mentioned bur oak and northern pin oak. So what is kind of on the horizon for white oak? Is that even a species that we should be planting?
White oak is not an extraordinarily present species in northern Wisconsin in general. You're going to see it more in central and southern Wisconsin. Not that it doesn't grow up here. It just grows in far fewer numbers. Northern red oak is going to be our primary oak species in northern Wisconsin.
And what about with a changing climate? Is white oak one of the species that is adaptable?
There is potential with changing climate, though you also have to pair the environmental site factors too. So just because the climate's changing doesn't necessarily mean the soil or anything is going to change with that. So there is potential, but that doesn't mean it's guaranteed.
So, Pat, for you, like you have a particularly difficult site, high exposure, open to wind exposure, sand, drought conditions. I would stick to some of these species that he's recommending, like the bur oak and the pin oak. to give you the best chance of survival on a large scale. The average landowner that we're working with, we've been working on this tree sale for over 25 years. And the average landowner does not have those types of site conditions. The average landowner is planting in more of a mesic forest, small areas. They're buying small numbers of trees and shrubs. And what we're trying to do with our sale is offer variety for people to have different species. We've adapted the sale to do research on what are species that could be threatened here in the future as our climate warms. We know one of our iconic species on the landscape, the balsam fir, that is a species that could be threatened here in Ashland County. That makes up a lot of our forests here. So what are species that we can recommend to landowners that would be coming to full maturity in 40 or 50 years if they're planting these trees now? And we don't tell landowners not to plant anything in particular, because there's always going to be smaller micro habitats on the landscape. There are likely places where cedars and balsams are still going to thrive, but they're likely going to be lower places on the landscape, cooler areas, damp locations. If landowners have dry soils or sandy soils or higher exposure or open, we're encouraging them to plant species that may be more suitable as our climate warms, if they want to maintain larger forest stands in the decades to come. We continue to always recommend diversity, though. Diversity is one of our best modes for any sort of adapting, whether it's pest species, whether it's climate, moisture, just adapting in life too. So the more variety that we can have, the better we're going to be to resist insects, pests, threats that might affect different species of trees or shrubs. Scott, do you want to say anything on this topic? Scott manages our sale, so he takes a lot of feedback from different landowners. And that's the other thing too, is we're constantly trying to work with over 200 landowners that are looking for certain species or have ideas. So we're constantly trying to improve and changing what we offer based on what's on the horizon for us in the future as far as our environment and also what are our landowners asking for.
Yeah, go ahead there, Charlie.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine that I help, and I've been helping him put in a mudroom and a deck, and for 2 years in a row now, I've dug post holes down 6 feet. It gets drier and harder all the way down to its dust at the bottom. It takes me 2 days to dig one hole, and I need to jackhammer and just dynamite. So there's that. So I don't know how any of Pat's trees are gonna grow when there ain't even water to be found if the root can get down 6 feet. So that's one thing. Second thing, what are we planting in place of the ash trees that will not get killed? And I don't need that answer right now. I'll get that later. For the tree sale, I think it would be nice if we, the returning customers, if we could give them a survey and ask them, what did you buy last year and what lived? You know, what are you having success with? That would be some empirical on the ground data. And then I was also thinking, it seems as we're becoming a desert, why don't we start planting trees like they do in the desert? Dig a big swale around them. Even if your ground is nice, dig the pit, put the tree on the top in the tailings, and then that swale will collect whatever water does come. Pat, that might help you get a few trees growing, because the water you get then will be held in that area for the roots to grab for a minute. But otherwise, this is and I don't like how the future is looking with this dryness. And I know the evaporation is a big deal out west. You get the same amount of water, but it evaporates faster. So there's less on the ground. There's less. So if you don't landscape to retain your water, you're going to be in trouble. That's all I have. Thank you.
So, you know, in the that higher sandy soil, red pine was mentioned. So I planted, 25 red pine last year, and there was 4 or 5 in an area I showed Kara at the end of July. At the end of June, we had 8.5 inches of rain, so I got lots of water through June. So this is that sandy soil, and it's an area just uphill, an area that's traditionally lower and wetter and has blackberry. So there's tends to be moisture flowing through there. So end of June, the green, but they never, when I would take the tree, it never seemed to really root and feel sturdy despite all that rain. So the end of June, it's green, but doesn't feel like it's done anything since I planted it. And I've been getting some trees out of Iowa State Nursery just because I can get them earlier, so I can plant them earlier in the season before it gets so hot. Because if I wait till even the first week of May some years, it's just so hot and dry up there and everything dries out. So I'm trying to get trees sooner for that. But a month later, Kara looks at them. They're brown, they're dead. What do I do? Can I plant red pine there? And if I go to jack pine, from what I've read on jack pine, I really should have fire occasionally if they're going to continue to propagate in any reasonable amount.
So with red pine, they are notorious for not rooting out very fast, but you will have success. I guess with a sample size of 25 though, it's going to be difficult. So normally when people are planting red pine plantations, it's tens to hundreds of thousands, and the expectation is that the more you plant, the higher potential you're going to have to get a fully stocked forested site. And I realize that's very cost prohibitive, but the 8 inches of rain there could also be something that would kill the trees too. So they don't necessarily need 8 inches of rain in a month. And that's another issue that I think we're going to run into with things like climate change, is we're teetering on these extremes to pull us into the averages. Well, we're seeing declines in a whole host of other species. So right now there's white oak decline across the Midwest. They don't know why it is, but the thought is that when it rains 10 inches for 2 months in a row, and then it doesn't rain for 3 months, and then it rains 10 inches again, that's completely stresses the trees out, and they aren't able to adapt. So they're more susceptible to disease and all sorts of other things. So that could be what you're seeing there. Jack pine, yes, in its large landscape level context, is a fire adapted species, but that does not necessarily mean that you would have to regenerate it with fire. You can regenerate it with cutting, so you would cut and then replant jack pine. It doesn't need to be planted in rows. I think everybody hears pine plantation and thinks that everything needs to be planted in perfect rows and everything, though much easier to manage then and carry out that site prep and site maintenance. That doesn't mean it has to be in that format. But if you don't do it there and you don't have that site maintenance throughout the beginning years of the tree's life, you're going to experience higher mortality. But I think what, especially on a really rough site, you're just going to have to accept the fact that you're not going to have 100% success rate, which isn't ideal, but there's nothing that can be done about it. There's just certain sites that you're going to have a lower success rate. And the hope is just to get as stocked of a forest as you can possibly get.
So when you use a tree planter, they're overplanting, assuming that they're going to lose a fairly good percent.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper to overplant than come back and fill in the gaps hand planting.
Yes, so there is interplanting that people will do. So especially like state forests and stuff that want a fully stocked forest because they want to be able to have commercial harvests at 20 to 30 years of age. You don't necessarily need to do that, but the more trees you plant, the higher success you're going to have, which is why a lot of times it's suggested to use some of those cheaper stock types in the thought that some of those trees are going to die. But if you plant 1,000 trees per acre, well, then you get half that survive. Then you're going to have 500 trees per acre in a fully stocked forest still after you experience that 50% mortality. And once the trees get rooted in and get to that 3 to 5 year age range, they're going to be out of the browse line of deer. So you're not going to have to worry about herbivory anymore. And they're also going to be a lot more tolerant to drought and other things. So in that young period of a tree's life, it's really susceptible to a number of different factors.
So I want to ask you about tree protectors. I had bought 500 of them 6 foot tall. It was what NRCS was recommending about in 2016 or so. They're no longer recommending them. I would not only not recommend them, I wouldn't even give them to somebody. And And I think on the higher ground, the biggest issue with that is no matter how much I've watered and mulched them and all that, I think they just get too hot in there. I don't think on those hot days, the tree can breathe. So what do you do for tree protectors? Because my red oak success rate up there, I quit replacing trees 2 years ago because I have hardly anything making it through the top of the tree protector. And if they do, the deer are still, breaking a lot of tops off. So what do you recommend on tree protectors?
So anecdotally, there is issues with tree protectors, and the Wisconsin DNR regeneration specialist that's stationed out of the Griffith State Nursery is now starting a project where they're comparing a bunch of different tree protector types. So there's clear ones, there's ones that are more of a mesh to allow for airflow. You're trying the white plastic ones, and then based off of control that has no tree protectors. And they're looking into this because anecdotally, there is a ton of, we get calls all the time about trees not able to make it through. Maybe they're overheating, and all sorts of other issues. I can't speak specifically to issues with any of them, but I do know that you're not the only person who's had issues with that. And that is something that is being researched and looked at. So we can hopefully in the next 5 years or so, provide better advice to landowners when it comes to using tree protectors.
Yeah, they also don't harden off. I've taken some where the tree is, say 7 feet tall. And if I take you can tell the tree is just spindly. If you take the tree protector off, the whole thing just droops over to the ground. And so they just don't harden off. Even if the tree protector blows in the wind, the tree protector is still rigid. So the tree itself, except at the base, there's no movement. And so they don't harden off. And that's turned into another issue. And then Charlie, on your ash, where I've put in some black walnut in tree protectors, Kara saw them this summer and she commented, she thought that of all the things I planted that I was having the most success with that. These are black walnut from Iowa State Nursery. There's some of them 7, 8 feet tall or more, and I planted them in 2021. So they were doing real good. And then there's actually one right along there. We missed it. It's got to be 20 feet or more from 2014 that I planted after that long winter. So the black walnut, and I planted some seeds from black walnuts from a tree along Lake by the waterfront here. I got some black walnuts from people there and just threw those in the ground, and those have not wintered killed, even though they're in an area with lots of wind and cold in a lower area. And then the red maple, that on is percent wise has been my most success, but it's an area with more moisture because it was too wet for the sugar maple. Those were dying out on me, but the red maple could take water better.
Yeah, red maple is bimodal in its distribution, so it'll survive well in dry soils as well as survive well in wet soils.
I think I got one more question on the tamarack. So I put in 5 or 10 tamarack for a few years now, so they got the bigger root mass. And so in the spring in areas that are wetter, you want them somewhere where there's good moisture, but that also means in the spring it's, kind of wet and mucky to get them in there. So I've been sticking some of those in, but my tamarack lose all of those needles. And then the ones that survive generate new needles kind of towards midsummer. So what's going on?
They're probably just suffering from planting shock. And then the ones that are developing a root system are able to survive and reflush. So tamarack is a deciduous conifer, unlike most conifer species. So if it gets overly stressed, it may drop those needles, but still be creating root mass under the ground and then able to regrow needles. In some of those lowland sites, and I know it's difficult to get the planting stock, but places that are seasonally wet in the spring, there is some look into offering tree seedlings through the Wisconsin DNR State Nursery in other times of the year once those areas have dried out. So whether that be a fall planting or something like that, but those would need to be specially ordered. So that would be something that would be a special order. But we're looking more into that because there are definitely issues, especially with the dieback of black ash from emerald ash borer, and people looking into some of these lowland sites that are far more difficult to plant, giving them certain other options to plant in those areas. Because the problem with the black ash sites is once you have great mortality on that site, you're going to hydrologically lose it. It's going to flood out and probably turn to alder and other things, and it'll probably be lost. So I think getting ahead of those issues before that happens is the ideal scenario.
So some of this old Lake Superior shoreline, it's going to dry out, so I'm on some of that, and there's a fair bit of it around here. By the end of the century, the prediction is going to be like the Barrens. So is there anything being done to try to get more of that into habitat that's suitable for what's coming? And, in particular, I'm curious about burning to regenerate things. Otherwise, it just, because even the popple is not going to regenerate like it once did.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely efforts to kind of do our best to predict what's going to happen. There's different habitat management strategies. There's also assisted migrations of tree species strategies and trying to move species out of their normal range into areas where they might be better suited with climate change. But I don't think there's a silver bullet answer to any of that, because I don't know if we're going to be able to predict exactly what's going to happen with a changing climate. I think a lot of the seasonality of precipitation events and stuff like that are going to change, but it's not going to be straightforward. So the best we can do is try to predict as best as we can and come up with solutions. And I think diversity is going to be the answer to that. Plant as much diversity as possible with the hopes that something survives.
That's what I'm trying, and I'll see you in the spring again, so.
We're going to have to move on to the next topic, but Charlie, we do have some information on our website. Carisha, if you can scroll down. Scott does have some stuff on what to plant. Where is that at? As far as what to plant in place of ash trees.
Carisha, if you want to go to shop all, and then there's a section for recommendations for restoration sites, and then sites with post-invasive species control. So that would be, and these are directly from, I reached out to a lot of the nurseries that we work with. These are not my species or my recommendations. These are directly from professional folks within the nursery field. So yeah, feel free to check those out.
So that's where we're directing people that would have like green ash or ash species in general. And we are recommending, like even on my own property, to start cutting some of the ash trees and replacing with some other species. So just active adaptation. But like Richard mentioned, areas that we have predominant like black ash forests, this is going to have a major, major impact as those trees start dying off. And we're seeing that already in the Bibbin Swamp. I did have one last quick question. Is there any research on just general survival rates of a seedling versus a transplant?
The reforestation team through the Wisconsin DNR does have a regeneration monitoring program, and they do have data available for that. But it's one of those things that would be hard to dig through. I could send you an email with some of that information from our regeneration monitoring specialists, and they have a few examples. There may be other research out there online as well too.
So there's not any just general statistics for like a good healthy site?
No, I don't think that there's a bunch of just general statistics out there. A lot of states don't even monitor what happens to seedlings after they go in. And I know we pick like 15 sites a year, but 15 sites out of who knows how many hundreds to thousands of sites. It's just difficult to do.
Did any of the other committee members have any questions? You have two experts in the room, so.
We feed birds like probably most of us do because we enjoy it. We don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing for the birds, but we still enjoy it. So, but anyway, we have a ash tree that we've had it treated for the boar, and I'm noticing an excessive amount of woodpeckers on it, and I'm just wondering how detrimental to the tree it is. I've been putting all the suet out I can to keep them on the suet away from the tree, but I don't know if that, I want to know if that, my question is that good or bad that the woodpeckers, the pileated and Perry and the downy and all, just numerous ones are working that tree. So they do eat a lot of suet too, but
So the woodpecker damage from if you have emerald ash borer within a tree, that's more of a symptom of the disease. It's not what's causing it or killing the tree. So what's killing the tree would be the bug larva inside the tree, eating out its vascular system. So that means the tree could be infected. There's also ash decline and other diseases that kill ash trees outside of emerald ash borer. So it could just be a displayed symptom of the tree being stressed out. So woodpeckers and animals like that are going to go in and find all those bug larvae and everything like that within the tree, but they themselves are not killing that tree.
You probably know though, Jerry, it's pretty likely why they're there. The increase in the woodpeckers.
Right, this will probably fit into our further discussion on climate change, but I'm wondering about the assessment of future fire risk, forest fire risk, and our planning of our ability to deal with that.
Rick Nestler is moving it over to the ranger. So there are assessments of Wisconsin. It's the Wisconsin fire landscape. And we will have an increase in fire risk in some ways, but if we're talking about landscape level fire, that's going to stick to the things that don't change as much, like Rick mentioned, the soils. So big sandy chunks of soil, like the center of the Bayfield Peninsula, are going to keep regenerating jack pine and red pine. And those are the kind of species where you have a large scale fire. However, large scale fires are not really the biggest problem for most individual landowners and homeowners. It's small fires because somebody was burning a pile of brush, never garbage. Don't ever burn garbage. It's really unhealthy for multiple reasons. But small burns in the backyard where somebody has long grass. So we may see an increase in those. I would have to look at some numbers, but if you have a prolonged dry period and your lawn starts turning brown, and if we have more of those with climate change, we will probably see more small fires. And it's on small fires where people are injured. And it's a lot of these small fires, just creeping grass underneath somebody's deck. That's what burns down their house. Of course, large scale fires are real. And if you have large insect infestations, maybe we would see more of that. But overall, protecting your backyard is probably the biggest thing you can do, because our lightning starts usually come with rain here. Out west, they have lightning starts with no rain. So lightning hits the ground here, we sprinkle rain on it, and you don't have that out in the middle of the woods start that gets cooking before anybody notices it. So for most of us, keep your yard trimmed, watch your burns, and that will probably keep us safer. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I got a couple of comments. My experiences, I'll make it short though. 1989, I ordered 3,000 3-year-old red pines when they had the Hayward Nursery open, and got a hand planted them and got a very good success rate. I'm thinking 70, maybe 75%. The following year, very close to, it was older pasture of sorts, unimproved land. The following year, I ordered 4,000 2-year-olds and used that tree planter, and it was just about a total loss. The year wasn't that different, but very poor success rate. The soil was a little different. Probably was a little bit wetter. Maybe the red pine shouldn't have been there, but that's my experiences on it anyway. And I got one more too. Month or two back when we went on that tour, in the Sanborn area. One of you guys pointed out, or maybe it was Mary Jo, the buckthorn bush. I happened to find some of that on my fence line with the neighbor there, the following month. So I was able to take care of that. Otherwise, I would have never known what that garbage was, but it's gone now. So that was a good catch in my opinion.
And that's conservation in action right there.
I wanted to comment on your observations of high survival, low survival. So there are many, many factors that could have gone into it. And of course, Rick is best to speak on that. But what I also enjoy is that some landowners are doing empirical numbers. They're taking an actual plot. Because when I first walked through the direct oak seedlings that Pat did, I was like, oh, this doesn't look too good. But as soon as I actually did small fixed area plots, my perception did not match what was actually there. So if any of you know people who are planting, if you can get them to do a fixed area plot, I mean, multiple fixed area plots, because Rick touched on this as well. If you do one plot, sample one site, we don't really have a trend. There's a lot of error in that. So the more people that actually take fixed area plots and write down their observations, maybe just if you're working with a DNR forester, email them or text them that day. Get that data out of your hands and to somebody else to take care of. I would highly appreciate that. And then at some point, I would love to talk to you all about buckthorn.
Thanks, Kara.
All right.
We'll put that on another agenda.
I've been asking.
Next topic, or any more? Everybody all got their comments? Which would be county mapping project.
Okay, this is an exciting new project that we've been working on. Our colleague in Burnett County, they have been mapping their conservation work for about a decade. And they record on their GIS map where their conservation practices are implemented. They track, they have to do dam inspections in that county, so they track that on a map. They track their nutrient management plans that they're developing with farmers. And they had a new grant last year where they asked Ashland to join in on it to start mapping our work along with Polk and Washburn counties. So we were able to get the system up and running free to the county through a DNR grant that we worked on with some of our colleagues. So my staff has been working on updating this recently. And we're basically going to show you some of the projects that we've been working on this year and where they're located in the county. But then we're going to be through the winter working on updating the last 25 years of projects that we've been working on. And Ellie's been diligently going through files and getting those mapping locations on our map. So we're just going to start out with some of the things that we've been working on this summer. We're going to spend maybe just 15 minutes on this or so, and take it away, Seth.
Yeah, so as Mary Jo mentioned, this software was developed by an outside organization. So there's a bunch of different layers, dashboards that we can use to kind of track what we're doing in a more spatial reference. So we'll go through that stuff today. And with the dashboards, you can sort and filter and do all these fun things. So this first map that we're looking at is our BMP map. There's also a project tracking map. And these both they're kind of duplicates in a way, but they have different information within them. So these are cost shared projects that the county's done over the years, dating back to whenever we have paper files for them. Not all the files are entered yet, so there's going to be some more dots on the map at some point, but as you can see, we're mostly concentrated around this Marengo Sanborn area. And some of the projects we've worked on this year, as we zoom in, the blue lines on there are watershed boundaries. So we can see how much we're doing in the Lake Superior Basin, how close they are to our rivers, streams, all the good stuff like that. So one project, for example, was an underground outlet we did this year. So when I go and click on it, it shows the practice name with the NRCS code that we use to implement that. It was an agriculture program. Voluntary, so you can, if there's enforcement action needed, you could select that. So over the years, people can look back and understand what went on there. If we need to revisit a site, do an inspection, we have it all on a map rather than ripping through filing cabinets and all that stuff. And we can also add pictures of what we've done. So there's a before picture, another before picture, and some during construction and post-construction pictures. We were able to do this for all of the projects that we've done in the last couple years here. All that information's entered in, and if we want to filter and sort out some of this stuff, we can see by watershed how many we've done. So as mentioned, there's 102 points entered in. And some of these are, maybe different practices within a project. So if there was an access road with a fencing component, you might have a couple dots on there. Oh, yes, I forgot to mention BMP stands for Best Management Practice. So just kind of the best thing you can do for that landscape or that project.
And just a quick note here on this screen. So this is our main program that we are cost sharing with landowners. So landowners come to us with a conservation concern or an erosion or water quality concern. And Seth is working on designing these best management practices. We have the engineering approval to design at least 36 different types of practices. And then he works with that landowner to come up with the design, make sure it meets their concerns on their landscape. And then we reimburse them 70% of the cost. So that's our cost share program. And you can see the dollars listed up there on the screen. We get about $50,000 annually for Ashland County.
Yep. And kind of diving into the reporting side of things, it is nice being able to just look at this and say, what have we cost shared over a date range? How many BMPs have we installed? How many acres or linear feet of projects? And there's also these phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment reduction models. Phosphorus and nitrogen are both in pounds. Sediment is in tons. So we don't have the models ran for every project we've ever done, just the more recent ones as developments and software have happened. I do caution these numbers are probably not exact, because if you put in a watering pad, what's the exact number there? It's close, but the software we use isn't exact. Yep.
This is actually incredible. I'm super excited because this is the first time I'm seeing this. But we have to report to the state every year on the practices that we implement, how many pounds of phosphorus was reduced, how many pounds of nitrogen, how many tons of sediment. So you look at these numbers here, and particularly for the Lake Superior watershed, if landowners are adjacent to streams and water bodies that are eventually flowing into Lake Superior, or any of our other high-class waterways in Ashland County, 1 pound of phosphorus that enters the water can produce up to 500 pounds of algae. So you look at some of these numbers on the bottom of the screen, and this amounts to some level of reduction of nutrients or sediments that are no longer entering our waterways. That is a huge conservation bonus for the county. It's also an incredible asset to be able to continue protecting these waterways for the reasons why people come here for recreation and why we choose to live here.
So with this, we're also able to filter when this was installed. So I filtered to the last calendar year, December 30th to the end of December this year. And the cost sharing amount, I think there's probably a couple that were entered in redundantly because we're entering in multiple practices as we go. So the funding amount is not correct, a little disclaimer. We're still working through some kinks, but the acreage that relates to if we put in a wetland, what size it is, linear feet of access roads or other projects, and then these numbers are all up to date. So in the last year alone, we've reduced 675 tons of sediment going into Lake Superior, because that's where all of our projects are or have been. Jumping over to the project tracking layer, as I mentioned, this is kind of a little backup of what we do in the BMP layer. This tracks all of the other cost share projects we do. So as you select it, it has different information because these different layers don't have, they're not compatible, so you have to enter it in twice. So this is more about like what actually happened with the project. Did you do an as-built survey, double checking what you said on the plan actually went in or what changed? Yep, we did that. Permit information, client ID. So we also enter in everyone's name, phone number, address that we've worked with. So everyone has just a random number assigned to them. And if we look back and say, I want to get this person's phone number or have they moved, we can go in, update that info as needed. And when was construction complete? When was the cost share contract signed? All that good stuff. And there's also project descriptions of who the contractor was, the different practices that were used. So on the other screen, we can only select one type of practice or BMP that was used, where here we can list in, there is more than just a underground outlet that went in. There was, of course, now I can't find it. There's a lot more stuff that went into it. So there was obstruction removal, a subsurface drain, and underground outlet, the cost share contract numbers. So as we're going in and looking through our filing cabinets, if we have a landowner that calls in and says, I have a project I want to do here, we can look it up on the map and say, that sounds kind of familiar. We'll double check this with our paper records, make sure we're not duplicating a project and double dipping funding that we've already used to do something there. And a copy of the cost share agreement as well is accessible from this page. Some of our other programs, Matt runs the nutrient management program and farmland preservation. So we're also able to track all of this spatially, and I'll let Matt take over and I'll kind of just click through some stuff as he speaks.
Yeah, so on this one, these dots represent where the home farm would be for where nutrient management plans, where their checklist is assigned to. And so each one of these is where, like I said, that home farm is at for where a nutrient management plan is based out of. There are 11 of them in Ashland County spread out throughout the county. Seth, if you want to just zoom out again a minute. You can see mostly in that Marengo area, and then the one down in Butternut. Those are ones, this only represents the ones from just this year, the 2024. The ones that were turned in 2024. This will get updated once again year after year, and we'll backlog all the data that gets entered in. There's going to be some new ones that will fill in, but there are I want to say it was 88,300 acres in this. So you just see those dots as where that home farm is, but there's 8,305 acres across 11 different farms in nutrient management planning, which is really awesome to see. These numbers do get reported across several different areas. So it's nice to have it in one central location to see a large swath of acreage, which is nice just to have another BMP location. And then, like Seth mentioned, you can filter it to also show if they do have a farmland preservation agreement as well. And so if Seth, if you want to show where the farmland preservation ones are too, takes a couple agreements. There's 4 active ones in Ashland County right now, and so those are right there within our agriculture enterprise area. And those, I don't remember the total acreage encompassed by it, but I want to say it's around 3,000 acres encompassed in the farmland preservation, maybe a little north of that. And so it's just another tool to get to show us where those are all at and spread across. There's, as we were playing with it, there's a way you could highlight each individual field, but it changes so much year over year depending on all the leased fields, that it would be pretty intensive. And the tool that they plan on shows the highlighted fields. You would look at individual plans if you wanted to see individual fields. And so just to show actual acreage and stuff on here and individual names, it's a really nice tool to see total acreage on there. I think that's what I've got for that one.
And this map also has a dashboard as well, so we can, over the years, if updates are submitted and we want to see plan years from 2023 to 2024, we know there's been 8,300 acres submitted that year. And then as we go, if numbers increase, decrease, we can kind of track that in this dashboard in a nice place as well.
And it does tell you too, like when the last update was. It gives you exact dates on everything when everyone's was turned in. I track them all individually in different spots, but it gets entered into here too. You would know exactly when each person's plan was originally created, instead of having to filter back through paper contracts to figure out when did they first start it. This is a fantastic tool to know when they first started nutrient management planning. Will be incredibly helpful for that, as well as, figuring out exactly when their last one was turned in.
Yep, and we'll switch it over to Scott and Ellie with the invasive species layers.
So our layer looks a little different. It has a lot of different colors on it because within the or the AAS program, we do a lot of different things. So looking at the dots, the red ones are going to be all the different boat landings in Ashland County. And we did signage monitoring. So that means we went to each one, checked to make sure the AAS sign was there, took some pictures. If you click on them, it shows the pictures at every site. Yeah. So it just kind of, over the years, as we continue to go back to the sites, we'll be able to see the change. And if we replace a sign and all those things, and like water levels and all those things. And then our main lake monitoring are going to be the turquoise and the blue dots. So if you go to Lake 3, and then the boat BL1 point, on all our boat landing 1 points, we have our pictures inserted from when we're monitoring. So we take pictures of things we found, like we found a bunch of, this one was flowering, and we just can kind of track over the time what invasive species we find and if lakes are still clean. So this was a clean lake that we didn't find any invasive species, but we still could take pictures of the cool things we did find. And then if you go to Day Lake is where a lake where we found a bunch of aquatic invasive species. And so those are going to be turquoise, and we track the different points that we have there.
Plant like so way to the south. Yeah, you're close there. The big one, yep.
This is great because one of the programs that we work under annually is called the DNR Lake Monitoring Protection Network. This is a program that we receive an annual grant contract to help implement projects in Ashland County. And Scott manages that program. So monitoring, lake monitoring, looking for early detection of invasive species, monitoring changes over time, is all part of a requirement through that program. So we did purchase a boat a couple years ago on a grant for the county. And Scott's able to use that annually to get to as many inland lakes as he can to conduct this type of monitoring that they're explaining to you right now.
For that one, it'd be, yeah, boat landing 1.
Yeah, and just to kind of build off what Elliot said, this is just a really, really helpful tool. So basically with this, we can track not just, on a sheet of paper, our monitoring the boat landing or our different sites, but this is, it's accurate down to about 15 feet or so, which especially in the invasive species world, you're not just looking at presence absence, but we can also really get it down to 10 or 15 feet of air, which is pretty awesome. And within that, if you kind of zoom out just a little bit there, Seth, you can see, so we typically, depending on the given lake, we'll typically do at least monitoring at every single boat landing and access point. So whether it be like a canoe launch, an actual physical boat landing, or maybe just like a carry-in access. So we'd always monitor at those locations, and then 5 additional target sites. So we basically pick out the target sites. So we look for kind of high use areas. So it could be like on Day Lake as a prime example. So we usually pick our sites where we're most likely to find invasive species. Day Lake having both a boat landing and then also a fairly used campground as well. Also with 2 beaches. So that's a really, really good sites to look at there. And it's just, yeah, very, very helpful to be able to, visually see exactly where we're doing our monitoring. And then I think what'll be really, really helpful is over the years as well. It's not just all the information that you see captured here. This is just for the 2024 field season. I think one thing that we're really going to see the advantage from, we have data going back, oh boy, probably 2011, 2012. So we'll be able to add all that information within there. So it'll be really neat to be able to track how quickly are a lot of these invasives, are they spreading at all? And on the ones that are spreading, what are the densities looking like? And just kind of seeing the progress that we're making over time. And then Seth, if you want to zoom out a little bit, we also, if you want to go to Loon Lake by Copper Falls, perfect. Yeah, so this is a good one. So we do, so it's not just for like monitoring and, we found invasive species, but it's also helpful like from the control side as well. So we implement invasive species control, not just actually looking for the species and finding them, but also implementing some control work as well. So if you want to click on some of the target sites there, especially the control photos.
They should be in boat landing 1, BL1.
Yep, BL1. Perfect. Yeah, just keep scrolling down if you would there. Yeah, so you'll see the control kind of in action there. So it's kind of nice to take pictures of the actual control and be able to look back over the years and just see, is it maintaining? Is it being reduced? Is it increasing? Obviously, in a perfect world, we want to see it decreasing or possibly being eradicated. But we can kind of track that change over time there. So, and then a couple other things to point out if you want to zoom out a little bit. We also use it for a lot of our other invasive species programs. So we do not just lake monitoring, but we also look at rivers, streams, and creeks. So that EIS monitoring is called Project RED or Riverine Early Detectors. So this year we did some Project Red monitoring down on the Chippewa River. And yeah, if you want to scroll down there, perfect. So it's a nice way to document not just our lake monitoring, but also our river and stream monitoring as well. And then you see a few other colors on there. So one thing that we have come across more and more just in the last few years, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot more blue-green algae out on the water. It feels like it's very much directly correlated to an increasing temperature or climate change, I should say. But yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot more blue-green algae, and we're starting to track that, which is something that really hasn't been done all that much in the past. So, so this year we found it on let's see, Day Lake, Butternut Lake, and Upper Clam Lake. So we put points on all three of those lakes, and again, this will be nice for not just the 2024 season, but to be able to see how much more prevalent are we going to see this in the years to come. So. Yeah, so that so blue-green algae or cyanobacteria, so it is toxic to at least in large quantities. It is toxic to things like especially like small dogs, even medium-sized dogs, and I would say like children, definitely babies for sure, can definitely pose a lot of health concerns. So that's something that we've really kind of ramped up our efforts looking for. It's pretty easy to identify. It kind of looks like kind of bluish greenish paint spilled on the water, and we're definitely seeing that a lot more. So this map really helps us kind of identify that, and then also when we do find it, either myself or Ellie has reached out to. We work with Ashland County Health and Human Services just to kind of get the word out there. We also ordered, for the first time ever, ordered blue-green algae alert signs. So we'll be able to install those signs when we do find blue-green algae, especially in high amounts, be able to install those at, let's say, like beaches or even boat landings, access points, just to kind of inform the public that this stuff has been not only found, but also just kind of make sure that they're not swimming in it and especially consuming water so they don't get sick. So yeah, and I think am I missing anything?
Yeah, other than our AIS monitoring, lake monitoring projects, we're also going to use this map for citizen AIS. And so there's one yellow dot. This year we went to Meter Lake and had a citizen, or we kind of rode in a pontoon, assessed the lake because a citizen had asked about it. He wanted to know what was growing in his lake. So we did that. And found that there was a lot of Elodea. He thought there was an invasive all over his lake, but it was just a native. And then we also are going to use this to for our education activities. So this year we did the Student Science Expo at the Great Lakes Visitor Center, and in prior years, Scott has done bird nest boxes and other things that we'll be able to go back and track, but we get to kind of show the different education points that we do with this map as well.
Perfect. Questions?
Right, so this all looks great. I'm just, is that easily accessible for those of us on the committee and or the general public?
No, this is a tool for us to be able to use to track monitoring and for reporting purposes. So it's more of a tool in our toolbox for us to be more efficient how we do work and for us to be able to track research and monitoring over time. Seth, is there a way for the public to use this?
The public facing ones are listed on here. So if I sign out quick, you'll be able to see which ones are public facing.
And would they have to have an account for that?
You might need actually I totally messed it up now. But if there is a way So the ones that are public facing have these little globe icons. The ones that, so they're connected to the Citizen AIS, for example, is connected to all of the Citizen AIS info for the state records. So anyone can go in and view it on our site because it's also available through a different site. What we, I guess, due to confidentiality and landowner agreements and not all of these landowners, for example, that I've worked with have disclosed the authorization to share their information within our partner agencies or other landowners. So we can't just go and say, Joe Schmo's doing a project, I need every info, or you can't request some of their personal information. That's why it's not public facing, because otherwise you'd be giving out a lot of info that way.
So it might be useful to enable members of the committee to have access to this information.
And as far as I know, we have an account through our GIS department to be able to access this. So I'm sure if you stop in or at our other committee meetings, we'd be able to provide this. But as far as like getting a GIS account for the committee to have easily accessible info, that might be through GIS department and costs and all that. But also a Mary Jo question, I'm just filling time.
Sorry. I missed that. We do have catered lunch arriving at 11, so we got to keep that in mind too. I mean, we do have all those photos, so those could be uploaded. This project took a couple years to build all these layers, and I'm not sure how easy it is to add additional layers like flooded culvert layer or the needs assessment, erosion hazard sites that we need to address. This is a special grant project that we were invited to do. This took a lot of work and a lot of money. So, I mean, we are very progressive in our department. We're always trying to make improvements. This would take, I mean, it took a consulting firm to be able to design this. It was very labor intensive, so I'm not sure. And Washburn and Polk. Yeah, and we are the only counties in the state that have this level of tracking and mapping currently going on. Yeah, I mean, basically, this is a tool for us to use in-house to help us primarily with our reporting. But also, I think it's a great tool for us to be able to educate you on what we're doing through a visual manner instead of just reporting from our staff report. Here's our projects. It gives you the visual.
Yeah, it's very impressive, and I want to say, wow, I'm very impressed with it. It shows how far we've gotten. It's really good. Thanks.
Yeah, just a quick note. There are other culvert inventories being done across the state, and it's very concentrated in northern Wisconsin. A lot of that effort is being led by Trout Unlimited and their ability to get grants. And there's also this FEMA advanced assistance. So I'm not sure where this came from, but I believe there are a few layers on our public GIS site, just like Ashland County GIS, boom, you can get in and there's some public layers and stuff like that. So there are different ways to explore the different maps that are out there and available. And there's definitely interest from partner groups to create maps and use that as a funding tool to get some of these projects going. Like you had mentioned, if I've done town meetings with town supervisors, with Wisconsin Wetlands Association to kind of fill out their needs, and then we entered all of that into a mapping software that's housed somewhere, different website, but we can use that as a tool as well. So although this is very specific to our department and what we do, there are other organizations out there tracking spatially as well.
Seth, can you click back on the map from the FEMA culverts?
Yeah.
Charlie, to answer your question, we do use this now. This was a FEMA Advanced Assistance Grant that was conducted in Ashland County a couple years ago that looked at culverts that have repetitive loss. So these were culverts, a lot of them washed out or were damaged in the flood. And repetitive loss doesn't necessarily mean it washed out. It meant that there has been maintenance required at the site repeatedly. And so one of the big grants that I just submitted yesterday for 300,000, we are using these maps that have been done to look at where are our hazard sites at road stream crossings, and using that data that's been conducted to apply for grants to start updating some of these project and concern areas. So we do have another grant that was just applied for to implement some of these red dots that have been identified as repetitive culvert challenging sites.
Okay, climate change adaptation discussion. What do we got on that? George?
Just a short thing to mention. So Ashland County is beginning its long-term planning, the 10-year plan, which would be, I guess, effective 2026 for the next 10 years. And so Extension Service is already doing some work on this. And Lissa Radke is currently working on the agricultural segment of the long-term planning. So if there are members of the committee that have questions or have input to that, they should probably get in touch with Lissa. It's the county's long-term comprehensive plan.
Pat?
Lissa sent out an email. I'm not sure who all was copied, but on December 17th, I believe at 2:30, if I'm not mistaken, there's an hour-and-a-half meeting on Zoom, kind of an ag subgroup. And I don't know if she is going to extend into forestry on that, but certainly we should, look at forestry and climate change also. I don't know if she's got a separate subgroup coming on that or not.
Forestry falls under natural resources. It doesn't have a separate section in the comp plan.
Does the ag fall under natural resources then
No.
too?
Agriculture is separate.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, number 7, agency staff reports.
Okay, we don't have any agency staff here today to report on, but we'll go ahead and go into some staff reports. So Seth, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll just keep this very brief because we spent a lot of time with the mapping and I showed you one of the projects, but the other cost share projects were installed. I listed the dates, the practices, what we did there. The natural flood management project is all wrapped up now. We held some tours. Some of the LCC members were able to make it, as well as other legislature and partners as well. Attended a few trainings and also some additional water quality monitoring, site visits as requested, and there's a couple pictures there. Are there any questions on my report?
Awesome. Yeah, I can chime in next. As always, feel free to ask if you have any questions there. Should have my report in front of you. Just a few things. I know we've talked about the mapping and tree and shrub quite a bit already, so I'll try to keep this short and sweet. The Ashland County tree and shrub sale is live. Things are selling like hotcakes. So definitely, if you're interested in getting in orders, please do so sooner rather than later. We're still using the exact same website, so ashlandcotreesale.com. So far, yeah, there's been a lot of orders placed. And it's been really nice having a lot of feedback from folks that are placing orders. That's absolutely huge. So it's nice that like Pat is sharing his information here, but really nice to get information from all the folks that either see my contact info and either call in or toss emails. Really nice to hear all that feedback from the program. So. But yeah, that is live and taking in orders left and right. And then the only other thing I guess I was going to highlight is we've got our poster and speaking contest. We do that every year historically, especially for the poster contest. We have some of the higher participation rates compared to the other 72 counties. Definitely hoping for more of the same this year. So this year's contest theme is "Home is where the habitat is." So definitely looking forward to seeing all the posters roll in. The contest, we are going to do our Ashland County contest on January the 16th. It's always nice to have some LCC reps. If you guys are interested, definitely please let me know. You're not only more than welcome to attend, but definitely encouraged to attend, even if there's a few folks that want to help out. That would be awesome. Just helping out with judging and that kind of stuff. That would be awesome to get you involved. Historically, our staff does it as well, but it's always nice to have some LCC representation to judge as well. So I will sign off with that. But yeah, happy to answer questions.
I'll keep it quick too. As the summer wrapped up, I finished the Clean Boats, Clean Waters hours, and then Scott and I completed our signage like we talked about on the mapping. We also had a booth in the Student Science Expo, and it was really rewarding. We did something more active this year than a normal table to see the kids light up and really click with the way that they got to act out with the freeze tag we did. I also created a Lake Superior trivia that we did at the Lake Superior Symposium this fall. And then a big thing that I've been working on was the mapping, putting points in. So I'll brief through that real quick. And then I was at many trainings and conferences and meetings as the fall kind of went on.
I'll try to keep mine brief too. No promises. But so nutrient management plans, did 18 updates so far in 2024, 3 new ones, and then 7 in the works that are being developed. Waiting on soil samples coming back. That's been a repetitive issue throughout the year. If you go with a private lab, it usually takes 3 days for soil samples to come back. Most of them have gone to the UW lab, and some have taken 3 months to come back. I have some people who are currently a month and a half in to 7 weeks in. And so we're kind of discouraging people right now from sending them to UW. We're going to try to encourage some other certified labs to try to speed up the process. So as soon as those come back, we'll crank out some more, but those will probably be early 2025. All the field days are over with and went really, really well. You can see the dates on there. We did a bulk nutrient management training this week, Tuesday and Wednesday, over in Douglas County for people to get certified and trained to write their own plan with a grant that's held by Douglas County that I help them write. That is what funds those field days. And then everyone that attends gets a $700 payment, as well as all of their soil samples paid for up to $750. Those went really, really well. And we're going to be holding one in Ashland County coming up. We're going to set the date in early 2025. Those get helped put on by DATCAP, the state, and then UW. So we're looking forward to those in the winter months when people are planning for Ashland County. I'm gonna have you flip over to the back of my report. I like talking about pictures. I like putting pictures on mine and talking about pictures. I don't like the words as much. And so you've seen the top 3 photos before, figure 1, 2, and 3. I like showing those. Farmers really like seeing these a lot because it really gives a pretty good display. We took those in the spring rains, I want to say last spring. Is that top left, you can see it was a hay field. When there was just an absolute ton of spring runoff, and then top right was a field that was tilled in the fall. And where those 2 waters met in that culvert, pretty clear difference in what that runoff looked like. Night and day, what it looks like if there is living roots in the ground and root cover versus a field that's tilled. This year, the same funds that you can pay out nutrient management plans, we were able to pay out for cover crops. And so if I was able to design some cover crop strategies, we have to meet NRCS standards. And I had 2 farmers in Ashland County that were willing to put in some cover crops. They jumped at it. I had actually 3 farmers that wanted to do it, but we didn't have the entirety of the funds to complete one of them. And they wanted to do all of it. And so it didn't work out for the 3rd one. But we were able to get them in. And so figure 4 and 5, 4 shows the pre-planting of the cover crop. And then figure 5 shows what it looked like 4 weeks after. Mind you, in that 4-week period, there was almost no rain. And that cover crop of winter trit did fantastic in that stretch. And then I wish I would have got a photo just before the snow fell. All those bare spots that you could see in between the rows, they're completely filled in. That trit did absolutely fantastic in covering the ground. It's going to hold in the ground over the course of the winter. We should not see almost any runoff. We might see a little bit. That's just how it goes. But we should see a huge reduction in runoff. And then the goal is going to be 2. Typically, farmers up here are tilling in the fall so that they can also till in the spring, because you get such a hard layer on the surface that you can't till in the spring if you don't do a pre-till in the fall. But you have to till again in the spring because you get such a hard packed layer on top in the spring. So we're hoping that by doing the cover crop, we're holding in the soil that from the fall tillage, but we're also hoping that he's not going to have to till in the spring because that triticale should hold in the moisture and prevent that surface layer of crust from forming. And so the goal is that he is then going to terminate with mowing and then no-till corn into that. Not on these fields.
So
Not
this
on
is
these
a
fields.
this is a huge success story right here. Why do we care about cover crops? Matt mentioned that it prevents runoff. So this is protecting our waterways. It's keeping soil on the landscape. And cover cropping, he mentioned, will help hold moisture in the soil. So it's a very effective method for improving soil health. And this is a practice that we are trying to increase in Ashland County. Not a lot of our farmers are using cover crop as a practice. And so Matt's ability to be able to encourage a farmer who's never done this before to start a brand new practice on a large scale application is a great success, and it will also serve as a peer example for other farmers as well. Sorry to interrupt you.
So we had two farmers who were willing to experiment with it. One of them did trit, the other did rye. The rye came up fairly good. It didn't have quite as good a cover. I don't have photos of it, but it should come up really, really well in the spring. It was pretty hardy and it should reduce erosion as well. And so we're pretty encouraged by it, and I've had quite a few other farmers with interest in it. What's really nice is they get pretty hefty payments for this. They get $60 per acre for this particular one. They can get up to $75 an acre. That more than covers the cost of seed. It doesn't quite cover the cost that they're going to have in running their tractors on it, but it takes out the risk of them doing it completely on their own. And so it allows them to actually experiment and try it. And they are incredibly encouraged by trying it. The guy that did the trit here, he told me he's going to try 700 acres next year, with what he's seen so far. And so that's fantastic. The other guy sounds like he's fully on board, and I've had other farmers call me and say in Ashland County and call me and say that they're on board. If there's funds next year, they 100% want to do it. I was pretty hesitant if cover crops would work in Ashland County. I was more pushing perennial crops. That you could plant like alfalfa that you could plant and just leave in the ground and not have to till. I thought that with our growing seasons, it would work more. I do think these are better suited for dairy, that you're going to be chopping corn earlier. So I think it's not a blanket fix for everybody, but any fields that we can possibly get cover cropped and make these work in scenarios, I think is a good thing. And there's people trying it, and it looks like it's been quite successful so far. We'll see what happens in the spring, but so far it's gone very well, and there's been a lot of interest. Like I said, we went through these fields pretty quick, and I had other farmers that were interested. Were interested right away, and these guys already are like, if there's money next year, I want to do it next year too. But they've told me that with what they've seen, regardless of if there's money or not, they're probably going to do it on their own anyway. So it's been very successful, and we're very, very happy about that. Anyone have any questions about anything?
So I've cover cropped with winter rye in my garden, I think since '06. It's just amazing what cover cropping does for the soil, weed control, building up organic matter, holding moisture. It's amazing. In terms of the winter rye in particular, my neck of the woods, there's someone that runs a lot of ground, including mine. And I've asked about, raising some winter rye for cover cropping. And they initially, when they started in 11, they did have some winter rye, but not enough market, not enough profit. So I guess I would encourage you to, talk to local producers and maybe them in particular, given their capacity, including using the straw, because the more winter rye that we can raise up here for the local market, as an economy, it closes that loop some, but there's also ground up here just in terms of diversifying the crops that are in rotation from some of these guys that just run row crops, adding that diversity and winter rye in particular, and on some ground in particular, it would be really nice for the benefit of that being raised locally. And then also in terms of weeds, I've gotten weeds in my garden from the winter rye, and I asked, where are you getting this? And I get it from Deer Creek. So I went to Deer Creek, and they said, well, depending on the year, we get it from different places. And so we're bringing weeds in. And this is one of the things about, when we were a small farm and had our own fanning mill, we didn't introduce new weeds to the farm. Now, even with my garden seeds and winter rye that's clean, certified seed, depending where it comes from, you get new weeds. So if we close that loop a little bit with local winter rye, we're also going to, keep that money here, improve the variety of crops, the diversity we have. But we might also, reduce the weeds that people otherwise might not have on their places, like yellow mustard. Geez, I never had that, and now I got it. Foxtail, never had it. Now I got it. So
I wish I'll get out during the field days this summer that we were able to cost share for cover crops. This is very new, very, very new that we were able to actually cost share for this during the field days, all but one of them. The one in Iron County was later. We still were not able to cost share for this. And so had I been able to advertise it at that point, we talked about cover crops at all of them. But that funding source wasn't out there. And so we pushed it at the training I did Tuesday, Wednesday, and then when we do the Ashland County one, it'll be another big push. And then at all the field days that we'll do next year, it'll be another big push. So I foresee it really, really taking hold. And then just word of mouth from farmers talking about it and the success that we've had. I expect it to go pretty well. And weather is dependent on it always. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, if anybody on the committee here wants to see, just go drive through the ag enterprise area and you'll see the green fields. That's the cover crop. So it gives you a good feeling.
Right along 112. Yeah. If you drive right by there, you'll see the fields that this is in. You can see it. Yep. And that's what we paid for. That's all that we paid for. That's all that this stuff is right there.
So that's a perfect segue into mine, and I'm not going to keep you long from lunch. But all these great projects you're hearing about is lots and lots of grant money. So all the bullets in the bottom part of my page are grant administration. We've submitted reimbursement now for a little over 325,000 in grants this year. These guys are doing an awesome job on all of our projects. We're trying to bring as much money to Ashland County as we possibly can. The biggest grant project we wrapped up was our Act 157. That was our tour that we conducted this fall. That project's been going on since 2019. You've heard me talk about it a dozen times, but that was a special allocation from the Wisconsin legislature directly to Ashland County in 2019 to implement 3 natural flood management demonstration projects. We are very glad to have that wrapped up. That one project alone, we ended up having 5 different grants over the years that brought in over 400,000 to implement that. It's a huge accomplishment. We have a 30-page report that we submitted at the end of September that's on our website if you're interested in knowing the details about that project. But lots of grant work, lots of money coming to the county. We'll continue doing this in the future. The second thing I wanted to bring up real quick is our Wisconsin Land and Water State Conference will be in Green Bay on March 5th through the 7th. And I do have a budget for a couple of committee members to attend. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me and I will get you the agenda and we can get you registered in the new year. I would like to schedule our next LCC meeting for February 12th, if that works for everybody. We do have to get our wildlife damage person here and have some corn prices set. So he's asked to do that in early February. Yeah, we'll go to 9:30. And then I would like you guys to give this crew a round of applause because they have done exceptional work in the past year. We have an amazing team. We have a high level, high energy workload. And I think they're all doing an amazing job. And we're hoping to keep Ellie on for a couple years. We're submitting a special grant to hire her as a project coordinator. So I hope to know permanently about that in a couple days. But if you could give them a round of applause, I would appreciate it.
Is that about wrap things up? We got our next meeting date scheduled, so is there a motion to adjourn?
He said the committee, but she's leader.
Move to adjourn.
Dave makes a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Charlie seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.